Dixie here. Today I'd like to introduce several new trail runners that I'm aiming to test out later this year. I'm typically of the mindset that if it ain't broke, you don't fix it, and that's why I've worn Altras for the past 3 years and several thousand miles. I found them on my thru hike of the Pacific Crest Trail when I was in desperate need of a new pair of trail runners. I was having some issues with my toenails at the time, trying to fall off, because my previous pair of trail runners was a little too small. So the wide toe box design of the Altra seemed like a perfect fit for me. They worked out very well for me, and they've kind of been a staple in the long distance hiking community and backpacking community in general. But there could be a pair of trail runners out there that works just as well or even better, and unless I test them out, then I won't know. But it's pretty risky to try something new like that on a long distance hike, so I thought with doing the Pinhoti this year, which is going to be a much shorter trail, that it would be a good time to take that gamble and see how something new works. First up is the Topo Athletic Terraventure 2 trail running shoe. I went with a US 11, which is also EU 45. I typically wear men's trail runners just because I have a large foot for a woman. It's slender but long, and since I could probably ski barefooted, then men's trail runners seem to do better for me than women's. Now let's talk about the specs of the Terraventure 2. As far as stack height goes, the heel sits up at 25 millimeters while the forefoot sits up at 22 millimeters. So this shoe does not have a zero drop design. It's a 3 millimeter drop if you do 25 minus 22. So while it's not a zero drop design, 3 millimeters is pretty shallow in the world of athletic footwear. Now let's talk about the features of the Terraventure 2s. The lugs are deep to help provide maximum traction in the mud, which is useful in the case that you're going to be going on longer treks and not be able to plan so much around the weather. So if you're in a muddy area, having some good traction to not end up laying in the mud is always nice. Also, a padded, what they call collar, which is just the fluffy area that's nice and cushiony around the ankle. Currently, these run on Amazon for about $120, which is in the typical range of what you should expect to pay for a good pair of trail runners to take out on a backpacking trip. My initial thoughts on the Terraventure 2s are that they seem like a well-made pair of shoes. I think they should hold up as well as the Altras have for me, at least. Also, I was a little concerned about them not being a zero drop shoe, but I couldn't tell that they weren't a zero drop. Again, 3 millimeters is pretty shallow, so I was happy to not notice a significant difference as far as how they fit or how they felt due to the drop. I really like the cushion that they have around the ankle. I mean, that could change, it could be annoying later, but just putting them on and walking around the yard, it was like, ooh, these are like kind of nice. The only thing that I'm not super crazy about with the Terraventure 2s is the color options that they have, but it's more about functionality to me than how fashionable they are on trail, because honestly, if they are the best trail runners that I've ever worn after I test them out, I don't care if they're as ugly as a pile of doo-doo. So anyway, I'm pretty excited to try these out, and initially I don't see any huge problem with them or feel like they would not work. Next up are the Inov-8 Terraultra G 260s, and they're kind of clever with the way they do their name. When I first looked at it, I was like, Inov-8, and then, but I assume that that's what they're trying to do there. Innovate. With the Terraultras, I ended up going with a 10.5. The 11s were a little bit too big. And for the EU, that's a 44. Now let's talk about the specs for the Terraultras. According to the Outdoor Gear Lab, they're 17 millimeters, but I found in other places that the stack height is 19 millimeters, so a little bit of conflicting information there, but I imagine somewhere in the 17 to 19 millimeter range is what the stack height is. Because the heel and the forefoot have the same stack height, that means that it is also a zero drop shoe. Inov-8 claims that they've got the world's toughest grip because they're made out of graphene enhanced rubber, which is supposedly 50% stronger, 50% more elastic, and 50% harder wearing. Online, you can find these shoes for about $120 at the moment. Like today, Amazon has them for about $10 cheaper. But again, that's the typical range for a good pair of trail runners. One of the reasons I was interested in trying the Terraultras is that they are a zero drop shoe, and also because I've read really good reviews about this shoe. In fact, Outdoor Gear Lab ranked them as the top zero drop trail runner. And I don't know if y'all have ever looked at reviews on Outdoor Gear Lab, but I've found them extremely useful over the years and very in-depth. So I'll include the whole write-up about the Terraultras in the video description below. One of the quotes that I thought was particularly funny and also useful about the Terraultras was by Runner's World in the UK, and they said that when the apocalypse finally comes, only Keith Richards and the Inov-8 Terraultra G260 will survive. And I feel like it's a little unfair that they left out Betty White, but I guess Betty White's not in the UK, so we'll forgive them. My first thought on the Terraultras when I first took them out of the box and put them on was that they're a really sharp looking shoe, in my opinion. They're definitely not as cushiony as the Terraventure 2s, but neither are the Ultra Lone Peaks that I'm used to wearing. Also, they fit pretty snugly to my foot in a good way. There's plenty of room in the toe box, but I feel like they hold on to the mid part of my foot and the heel part better than really any of the trail runners I've ever had. I like the way that feels because, like I've mentioned before, I have a narrow foot, so a lot of times I have to be careful that I have enough room in the toe area, but that my foot doesn't slide forward and ram against the toe. So I feel like with these shoes that definitely won't be an issue, and I'll either really love the way they hug my foot or I'm gonna end up hating it. So we'll see. So when I hit the Pinhoti, I'll have the Terraventure 2s, the Terraultra G260s, and I'll be comparing them to the Ultra Lone Peak 4.5s, which is the newest version of the Lone Peaks. So the specs on those, just for comparison, they have a stack height of 25 millimeters. They, again, are a zero drop shoe. And this time with the Lone Peaks, I had to go with a 10.5 instead of my typical 11s. I've noticed that when they come out with a new design, I have to kind of be careful and not just assume I'm the size that I was before. And EU measurements, they are a 44.5. As always with the Lone Peaks, they say they have a durable, quick dry mesh. While I definitely agree with the quick dry on the Ultras, one of my biggest pet peeves with the Lone Peaks has been that the mesh tends to wear out. And I think many hikers who have worn Ultras have seen that happen, but I do have to say that with each design, I feel like they really have improved that, and that they've made things a little bit more sturdy on the toe box to try to prevent from folks' toes popping through. I can say that from experience though, Ultra does have a good customer service. If you have a little bit of trouble reaching them by email, which I have had before, if you call them, they've always been quick to handle any kind of issues that I have. And if I haven't gotten the full life out of my Ultras, then they've been quick to replace them and send me a new pair. The Lone Peaks have moderate cushion. Ultra definitely has a higher cushion trail runner and also a more minimalistic type shoe. As I've mentioned before, they're known for their wide toe box and the gator trap in the back. So if you prefer to wear gaiters while hiking, then they've already got a cool little setup so you don't have to worry about sticking on a piece of Velcro that's later just gonna come off. So I'm pretty excited in a few months to be able to test out these different trail runners and compare the Terraventures and the Terraultras to the Lone Peaks. I think that they're similar enough that it's more or less comparing apples to apples, but different enough to where I might really prefer something different, you know, over the Lone Peaks. So I'm excited to see. And last but not least, I'll be testing out the Adidas Rockadia trail runners. I'm not testing these out to necessarily compare them to the Lone Peaks and the Terraultras and the Terraventures, but I got these specifically to try out with my budget gear setup. If y'all remember several weeks back, I mentioned I got a whole budget gear setup for less than $500, and that included these trail runners, because I can't go out and test all this budget gear and then have a $120 pair of trail runners on. So I felt like they might do the trick for somebody who's just getting into backpacking, doesn't want to spend a ton of money, but does want a specific trail runner shoe. I went with a size 10.5, which is in this particular shoe, a 44 2/3 in EU measurements. The specs on these are a stack height in the heel of 24 millimeters and in the forefoot of 16 millimeters, so there is an 8 millimeter drop in this shoe, which is more typical for athletic shoes. I'm not sure how they're going to work out for me since my foot is definitely used to a 0 drop, but time will tell. These shoes currently run on Amazon for about $65. At the time I got them, I believe they were in the mid 50s or so, which is a pretty good price for a trail runner. Not sure the quality of them and how they'll work for me personally, but on Amazon they have a 4.4 out of 5-star rating, so it doesn't seem too shabby. My initial thoughts on the Rockadias are they're not as comfortable as the other 3 pairs of trail runners that I mentioned today, but certainly they're not uncomfortable by any means. The biggest thing that I noticed with them is the more extreme drop in the shoe. Hopefully that won't be an issue, but after 40 to 50 miles or so, I'll let you know. Also, I feel like they probably won't be as quick drying, but again, you're gonna have trade-offs, and for half the cost, this really doesn't seem like a bad shoe from what I can tell just out of the box. All right, y'all, well, that is all I have for you today in the world of footwear and trail runners that I'll be testing out in the near future. I'm just curious if anybody out there has worn Altras and they actually worked well for you and you liked them, but then you ventured out and tried something new and you like it more, then I would love to hear what that is. Or just in general, if you have a favorite footwear that's worked well for you, feel free to leave that in the comments below. And if you want to give specifics about why you like it, that could be useful for somebody that's trying to find the perfect footwear for them. Thanks so much for watching, y'all, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe before you go, and we'll see y'all next time.